In the winter of 1887, in a sealed storage room beneath the administrative offices of the Metropolitan Board of Works on Spring Gardens, London, a maintenance clerk named Thomas Aldrich was cataloguing requisitioned hardware. He found a wooden crate that should not have existed. The manifest, written in clean copperplate ink, identified it as surplus ironmongery, condemned, removed from service 1884. Inside lay not scrap metal, but 47 intact gas lamp burner assemblies, each carefully wrapped in oilcloth, each bearing a stamp that corresponded to street addresses along the Embankment. What made this impossible was not the quantity, it was the date. The streets listed had no gas lines installed until 1889, 5 years after these burners had been catalogued as removed from service. Aldrich's handwritten note on the back of the manifest read simply, "Then what was burning?" The question has no clean answer. History has assembled a reasonably confident narrative of Victorian gaslight, a story of ambition and industrial ingenuity, of a city choosing to illuminate itself against the fog, of engineers laying pipe beneath cobblestones and connecting lamp to mains with satisfying mechanical logic. The narrative is tidy. The ledgers, however, are not. And in those ledgers, in the marginal notations and crossed-out addresses and requisition forms stamped with dates that precede the infrastructure they reference, something stranger persists. Time equals, quote, 750 milliseconds, quote / greater than London in the 1820s was a city learning, with some uncertainty, what light was supposed to mean. Gaslighting had existed in a provisional form since 1807, when Frederick Albert Windsor had demonstrated coal gas illumination along Pall Mall. The demonstration was theatrical. The gas arrived through pipes from a single portable retort positioned, that evening, behind a screen on the south side of the street. Spectators remembered the brightness. What they did not remember, because it was not reported, was that 3 lamps at the northern end of the demonstration burned with equal intensity. Despite being positioned, according to a contemporary survey map, beyond the length of pipe that had been laid. The survey map is held at the London Metropolitan Archives. It has never been satisfactorily explained. On the 3rd of April, 1812, the Gaslight and Coke Company received its royal charter. Workmen began excavating Pall Mall, then Westminster, then the broader arterial routes of the city, pressing clay and iron pipe into the cold earth. The enterprise was celebrated as a monument to rational progress. Parliament issued statements. Newspapers printed engravings of gangs of laborers, lantern-jawed and competent, laying infrastructure like arteries beneath the Capitol. What the engravings did not show, what the company accounts only obliquely suggest, was the sheer number of lamps that were lit and maintained in the years before the pipe network reached them. The gap was not small. A ledger from 1816, catalogued under the reference GLCC/LMA/4407, lists active lamp installations across 17 streets in the St. Giles district. Beside each address, a column records the date of gas connection. 14 of the 17 addresses have no date in that column. Instead, a single notation appears repeatedly, in what appears to be a different hand, written in a slightly darker ink that suggests later addition. Self-contained, continued in service. The phrase appears nowhere else in the company's surviving documentation. No internal memo defines it. No technical specification describes what it means. The fog was unusual that November of 1823, even by London's considerable standards. Contemporary diaries describe it as arriving in Seoul. Layers, a lower coal-thick murk that sat at knee-height in the morning, and a higher, more general grayness that filtered the daylight to something the color of tarnished pewter. In that fog, the gas lamps burned. They had been burning since the previous evening, as they always burned, casting their characteristic bluish-white glow through the glass panels of their iron lanterns. A watchman named Benjamin Coleshaw, whose route took him along the western stretch of Holborn, recorded in his duty book that the lamps had not been lit that evening by the lamplighter, that when he began his patrol, they were already burning. Coleshaw was not an impressionable man. His duty book entries are precise and economical. He notes the weather, he notes the hour. He notes, without apparent alarm, lamps already alight, lamplighter not yet arrived. The duty book is in private hands. A transcription was made in 1971 by a local historian named Dorothy Marsh, who attached a note asking, "Who lit them? Gas lamplight, in the conventional account, required connection to a main. The sequence was simple enough. Coal was heated in retort ovens, typically in a gasworks positioned at the edge of a district. The resulting coal gas, a compound of hydrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide, was pushed through a distribution network of iron pipes, sealed with lead joints, running beneath the streets. At the lamp post, a connection valve admitted the gas upward through the post's hollow, interior to the burner assembly at the top. A lamplighter with a long-handled torch would open the valve and introduce flame. The gas ignited. The lamp burned. The official record states this is how it worked. Yet the marginal note in GLCC/LMA/4407 suggests something persisted alongside this system. The photographs help, though not in the way one might expect. In a glass plate negative dated to approximately 1868, held in the Victoria and Albert Museum's collection of urban photography, a street in Bermondsey is captured in the flat gray light of an overcast afternoon. 7 lampposts are visible. 4 of them are burning. The timestamp, derived from shadow analysis conducted in 2003 by a researcher named Howard Pellman, places the photograph at approximately 2 in the afternoon. Mid-afternoon, no lamplighter would have been active. No evening lighting cycle would account for 4 burning lamps at 2 o'clock on a gray Thursday in November. Pellman noted the anomaly in a footnote. His paper concerned something else entirely. By the 1840s, the self-contained lamp, a device that carried its own fuel supply independent of mains connection, was not a secret. Several designs had been patented, trialed, and abandoned. One version, developed by a manufacturer named Josiah Cartwright, operating from premises in Clerkenwell, used a pressurized reservoir of oil gas concealed within the base of the lamppost itself. The reservoir, roughly the dimensions of a small barrel, could sustain combustion for approximately 3 weeks before requiring refill. Cartwright's correspondence with the Gaslight and Coke Company, recovered from a solicitor's archive in 1994, suggests he attempted to sell the design to the company on 3 separate occasions between 1838 and 1843. The company's replies are polite, brief, and almost identically worded, not required at present. The third reply is dated 6 weeks after an internal company memorandum, filed in the wrong folder, discovered only because of a cataloging error corrected in 2009, recommends the company quietly expand the practice of self-contained installations in districts where mains laying is not yet complete. The language is careful. The phrase "not yet complete" is doing considerable work. In several districts, the mains were never completed. The streets remained, decade after decade, illuminated by lamps whose connection status the company's own records classified as pending, a word that, in several instances, persisted in the ledgers for 30 years. The cold arrived early in January of 1855. The Thames would freeze that winter, and pedestrians would walk across it at Blackfriars. But before the freeze, there was a period of particular damp, a seeping cold that collected in the angles of buildings and turned the streets the color of dark iron. A gas engineer named Frederick Mellows was dispatched to investigate a complaint on Southwark Bridge Road. A lamp reported as burning, without authorized connection, consuming gas from no identifiable source. Mellows's site report, preserved in a folder of miscellaneous works orders at the Southwark Local Studies Library, describes what he found in careful technical language. The lamp post was structurally normal. The burner assembly was a standard flat flame design. The gas valve at the base was closed. The inspection plate on the lower post revealed, in Mellows's description, a small chamber, not standard in company specifications, fitted with a bladder-type reservoir and a slow-release valve mechanism of evident workmanship. The photograph Mellows made shows a cylindrical device roughly the size of a wine bottle, mounted within the hollow column of the post, connected by a copper tube to the burner above. In the bottom corner of the photograph, written in pencil, in what is presumably Mellows's hand, third one this week. The bladder reservoir was the solution that the official history tends to omit, not through deliberate suppression, but through the ordinary processes of institutional memory. The tendency to remember the infrastructure that succeeded and forget the stopgap measures that preceded it. Gas bladders, made from treated pig or sheep intestine, and later from rubberized fabric, had been used since the earliest days of gas demonstration to store and transport small quantities of fuel. Windsor himself had used them during his Pall Mall demonstration. A bladder of sufficient capacity, filled at a gasworks or a private retort, could be transported to a lamppost by cart inserted through an access panel and connected to the internal valve system. The lamp would burn for days, sometimes weeks, depending on the bladder's capacity and the pressure maintained within it. The process required a supporting infrastructure that was neither officially documented nor particularly secret. In a directory of London trades published in 1851, under the heading Gas and Light Requisites, several establishments list among their services portable gas supply, by measure, for remote illumination purposes. One establishment, trading as Hartley and Sons of Bermondsey, is listed continuously from 1847 to 1876. No other record of Hartley and Sons appears to survive, but a ledger from a local rate collector, examining properties on the same street in 1863, describes the premises as a manufactory of indeterminate product, operating primarily by night, carts observed departing before dawn. The rate collector's note has no official significance. It was written in the margin of a routine assessment. Someone, at some later date, has placed a small penciled question mark beside it. On the 17th of August, 1862, in Edinburgh, where gas infrastructure had developed along a similarly incomplete trajectory, a city gas inspector named Archibald Dunbar submitted a formal report to the Edinburgh Gaslight Company. It enumerated, in 11 close-written pages, 42 lamps operating within the Old Town district that he had been unable to account for within the company's connection maps. The report uses the word irregularities with the careful neutrality of a man who wishes to be accurate without causing alarm. Dunbar's 42 lamps were all burning. Several of them were positioned in closes, the narrow, covered passageways between tenements, where the installation of mains would have required significant excavation. The company's response to Dunbar's report has not survived. A brief note in a board minute from September of that year refers to the matter as resolved by administrative clarification, with no further detail. Dunbar himself transferred to a position with the city's water board the following year. The water board connection is not incidental. In several British cities during the mid-Victorian period, water and gas authorities operated in close proximity, not merely geographically, but administratively. Engineers moved between them with some frequency. The hollow pipe technology that enabled mains gas also enabled the concealment of smaller diameter tubes within larger infrastructure runs. Several historians of Victorian engineering have noted that the labyrinthine nature of subsurface infrastructure in cities like London and Edinburgh makes complete mapping, even today, effectively impossible. The National Archives hold requests, made as recently as 2015, from utility companies attempting to reconcile their own records with each other, finding, with some regularity, pipes that appear on no plan and connect to nothing they can identify. It is December of 1878. The streets of Westminster are cold and clean-smelling after a week of rain. A senior engineer named Albert Proctor is examining a set of specifications for a new lamp standard to be installed along the Victoria Embankment. The specifications are detailed, professional, and mostly unremarkable, but in a section headed Ancillary Fittings, there is a paragraph describing an interior access panel, dimensions given precisely, and within the access panel, a mounting bracket of a particular design. The bracket, as Proctor annotates in his own hand, is of the same pattern as the Hartley-Cartwright type, reserve capacity. 3 weeks minimum. Proctor underlines the phrase reserve capacity. He writes nothing further beside it. The lamp standards installed along the embankment in 1879 and 1880 are still standing. Several of them were listed as protected structures in 1951. They are admired for their cast-iron dolphins and their robust Victorian craftsmanship. The access panels where they survive have been sealed. A survey conducted by the Port of Our London Authority in 1967 noted in passing that several lampposts contained internal chambers of unknown purpose, now empty, with connection ports that did not correspond to any current utility layout. The survey was concerned with structural integrity. The unknown chambers were not its primary subject. They are mentioned in 2 sentences and then left. The technology never fully disappeared. It changed its name, changed its materials, changed the context in which it operated. But the underlying logic of the self-contained light source, independent of centralized supply, persisted through every iteration of public illumination. The gas bladder became the pressurized canister. The Cartwright reservoir became the sealed battery. The self-contained lamp of Holborn, became the solar-charged LED column of contemporary city streets, which carries its own power source within its base, charges by day, illuminates by night, and appears on no mains connection map, because it requires none. By the spring of 2021, in several British cities undertaking infrastructure surveys in advance of road resurfacing work, workers excavating beneath Victorian lamppost bases reported finding hollow spaces within the original iron columns, chambers fitted, in some cases, with the remnants of copper tube connections, corroded but recognizably purposeful. The chambers were documented, photographed, and sealed again. The reports describing them are held in various local authority archives, filed under maintenance and infrastructure. They are not secret. They are simply routine, unnoticed. Time equals, quote, 300 milliseconds, quote, / greater than, waiting in folders next to rate assessments and works orders and the kind of marginal notes that accumulate at the edges of official records, small and precise and quietly insistent. In a lecture delivered at the Institution of Civil Engineers on the 14th of March, 1889, a senior engineer of the Gaslight and Coke Company, named William Bartholomew, addressed the Society on the subject of the development of public gas infrastructure in the metropolis. The lecture was well attended. It was later published, and copies survive in the libraries of several engineering institutions. Bartholomew describes the gradual expansion of the mains network with evident professional satisfaction. He discusses pipe diameters and pressure management and the steady replacement of oil with gas across the capital's streets. He does not mention the period before the mains arrived. He does not discuss what lit the streets in the interim. The lecture is complete and authoritative and professionally polished. Someone who attended that lecture, we do not know who, wrote in the margin beside Bartholomew's chronology of the expanding mains network a single observation in small, careful handwriting. He leaves 20 years unlit. Below that, in the same hand, or lit in a way he prefers not to mention. Today, the principle of the self-contained urban light source is embedded in every modern city planning document that deals with remote or off-grid illumination. The terminology is clinical and contemporary. Autonomous lighting systems, independent power units, off-mains columns. The technology is solar or battery-stored or occasionally hydrogen-fueled, a fact that would have been recognizable to a Victorian engineer in a way he might have found darkly amusing. The design principles published by the Chartered Institution of Building Services Engineers include guidance on concealed internal power storage, access panel dimensions, reserve capacity ratings, and the expected duration of autonomous operation before servicing. The guidance reads as practical and forward-looking. It does not mention Thomas Aldrich or his crate of unexplained lamp assemblies. It does not mention Frederick Mellows in the cold of Southwark Bridge Road, finding the third concealed reservoir of the week. The streets of London still carry lampposts that date to the 1870s and 1880s. Their iron is original. Their hollow interiors, where they have not been retrofitted, are dark and empty. The connection points have been sealed, the access panels painted over, the chambers left to their own silence. On certain nights, when the November fog comes in low, off the river, and the modern sodium or LED replacements cast their orange or white light through the gray air, it is possible to stand on the embankment and look at the original cast iron posts, at the dolphins and the lantern housings and the sturdy Victorian engineering, and find oneself asking, without fully meaning to, the same question Thomas Aldrich penciled on the back of a manifest in 1887 in a cold storage room on Spring Gardens. What was burning? The answer is probably practical. Probably documented somewhere in a ledger that has not yet been found. Probably mundane, in the way that most historical mysteries are mundane when the evidence finally surfaces. Probably. The chambers are sealed, the records are incomplete. The lamps in the photographs burn at hours when they should be dark. The pattern persists.